Over 2 years ago on this very channel, I made a tier list video talking about amp sims and how I would rank them. Well, since then, so many new amp sims have come out, and amp sims are honestly more of a beast than they were back in the day. They're so different. They are being used in different ways compared to back in the day. So I wanted to make an updated video talking about how I would rank some amp sims in a tier list. So before we start talking, subscribe to the channel, like, share, comment if you enjoyed this video. Let me know what your favorite amp sim is. What are you guys using in your own original projects, in your bands, in your music, etc. And be sure to follow me on any sort of streaming service platform. I'll be sure to talk about which amp sims I've used in my own original music and what inspires me to create, as well as when I'm playing live, whether it's, live in the studio or live in front of an audience, etc. Okay? So looking at our tier list, it's nothing crazy in terms of a name or anything like that, just from D all the way up to S and everywhere in between, okay? Down below, we have all of the amp sims we're going to be talking about. And it is not going to be completely littered, we'll say, with Neural DSP or anything like that, because I think we can all agree that Neural DSP has more or less taken over the plugin and amp sim game. We're not going to be solely focusing on just Neural DSP products, but they are heavily included. I did my best to include a plethora and a variety of amp sims here. Now we have over 20 amp sims to talk about. Let's not waste any time. Let's go ahead right now, just at random. Go with a tried and true and instant classic. Back in the day when this came out, the Archetype Nolly. I'm going to put it in B tier. Now, preface all of this, I say, with a grain of salt. Obviously, this is one man's opinion, but also, too, a lot of my focus, especially with the Neural DSP stuff, is going to be focusing on can it or can it not be used with the Quad Cortex Live for me personally. I use a Quad Cortex Live, and I've been using the Gojira Live. And that's kind of one of the main reasons why I wanted to make this video as an update, because now we have the ability to seamlessly use amp sims live, and that's kind of shaping the future of guitar tones as it pertains to not only recording but also performing, okay? So for right now, I don't think the Nolly is available. I think it says down there, right there, yeah, coming soon. Like I said, when it came out, it was an instant classic. Everybody ate it up, everybody loved it, and people still use it to this day. It's over 5 years old now. It's always been one of my favorites from Neural DSP, but not anywhere near like the top Mount Rushmore of amp sims. It's always been just a solid entry for me. Let's go with the JST Disruptor, the Dino Cazares amp sim. It's pretty sick, man. It's pretty cool. A lot of good amp sim presets and stuff like that. It's got two different high gains. It's got like a modded JCM 800 and like kind of like it looks like a, I don't know, a futuristic dual rectifier. I'll put it in A tier. I did some pre-release stuff with JST when this came out a couple years ago, maybe a year and a half ago, something like that, whatever it was. I love the modded sound, and I love the mechanized, like I said, the kind of futuristic dual rectifier sound. It's really designed for heavy gain, high gain tone stuff. It's probably one of, if not my favorite from JST. And I use it quite frequently. It's a little CPU heavy, but there is a lot of cool added features where you can DI match stuff. You can have it set to where, depending on the number of strings you have on your guitar, you can click a little window, little button, and then it kind of shapes kind of like, I guess, more or less how much low end or how much buildup in terms of like signal and just overall rumble in the amp sim. So that's kind of cool. But yeah, man, I dig it, and I use it quite frequently. I don't think I've used it on any sort of original material, but I do use it quite frequently when I want to practice or if I want to get a quick demo out, okay? Let's go with the THU Overloud. Now, I use this a lot in 2022 and a little bit in 2023, and the song Subtle Comeback was written and demoed using this amp sim. So limitless, I feel so deeply now. This amp sim was introduced to me from Slate Digital, having done sponsored content with Slate Digital, and I really sincerely love that Randall modeled amp sim inside the Overloud, the THU Overloud. Again, Subtle Comeback, probably my most famous, most successful song to date, was demoed using this amp sim. I love how clean and articulate it is. And when I wrote that song using the double drop, the drop pedal, the octave below into this amp sim, it just tracked beautifully. and it was great, man. So this amp sim is responsible for this song. And I don't know if I ever told that story, but yeah, I'm going to put it up in S tier. I love that amp sim so much. That amp sim inspired me to write the song with Tom Barber from Darko and Chelsea Grin. Pretty cool story, right? Up next, we got the Corey Wong amp sim. I'm just going to put it in D tier, and that is just not a reflection of anything other than it's just not for me. It is not my style. It is not what I used to create. I'm not a Strat player, like a funky single coil Strat player. My Strat is used, very a la West Borland and very, high gain centric. So it's just not for me. So putting anything in the lower tiers is not a reflection of any sort of product, unless I truly don't like it. But if it's just not for me, I have no choice but to put it in the lower tiers, okay? But it has great clean tones, great funk tones, and all that stuff. It's just not for me, okay? So I feel bad, for the amp sim and the inanimate object, a digital product. But, it's not a reflection of the man himself or Neural DSP or anything. Just not for me. Moving on. Up next, let's go with the STL Tonality Josh Middleton. I'm going to put it in B tier. Just kind of hits middle of the road for me. Is it doesn't really necessarily stand out. Kind of similar to the Nolly, which is why the Nolly's in B as well. It's just kind of like a nice run of the mill. It doesn't do anything crazy or cool meaning like unique. It just does kind of like a standard high gain amp sim really, really well. And for that's not a bad thing. It's just not going to stand out for me and do anything amazing, right? Moving right along, let's go with the Petrucci from Neural DSP. I'm going to put it belongs in S tier, but I'm going to put it in A tier. This amp sim really changed the game when Neural DSP was continuing to evolve their products. I don't know if it was John Petrucci himself or Neural DSP or both, but when this one came out, to the best of my knowledge and the best of my memory, it was like this one had the doubler, had the transpose, had like the click track, had all these new features that were now industry standards on all amp sims. But I feel like Neural DSP was one of the first ones to do it. And I feel as though like when this one came out, not only was that the biggest name at the time for Neural DSP, arguably still to this day, but they threw everything at it. Has a great acoustic amp sim, clean, crunch, high gain, and lead as well. It's perfect, man. The only thing that is holding it back from me in S tier is it's just not necessarily my favorite rhythm tone or like high gain tone. I'm predominantly a high gain rhythm player with the occasional solo in some of my music, or like if I'm playing lead live with Elijah or something. But I'm always more focused on like an awesome high gain rhythm tone. And for this amp sim, in my opinion, it's a little squishy, a little liquidy, and I think that's kind of lending itself more towards like the lead player, in my opinion. But apart from that, it's amazing. Let's go with like the OG, the Menace from JST. I'm gonna put it in C tier. It's kind of dated and it doesn't necessarily sound all that great, but it is one of the pioneers, in my opinion. One of the first great amp sims to come out. I think this thing came out in like 2015, 2016, before I even had a channel. And I remember being stationed in, I think I was in Germany at the time in the military. And I remember just like doing research on amp sims and stuff. And I remember the Menace was, new at the time. And, here we are about a decade later, and it's not necessarily talked about anymore. It's kind of forgotten, but I think it was one of the pioneers and one of the first amp sims to really kind of, introduce the guitar community into the digital amp sim game. And now here we are a decade later, and, look where we're at, right? So the tones are still solid. I remember being a little disappointed with how much lack of gain this thing had. Like, you had to have it gained out. But again, the tones were great. It recorded great. I did a whole bevy of JST content years and years ago, and this one I think was my favorite. So that being said, I'll put it in C tier, respect to the OGs. Up next, let's go with the Tomarello from Neural DSP. I'll put it in C tier. Kind of similar to the Corey Wong, but not as on the nose in terms of just not for me. I mean, it sounds like rock and roll. It sounds like Tomarello. It sounds like Audio Slave and Rage and, all his solo stuff or whatever. But, not necessarily for me. That being said, if you want a JCM 800 sound in the form of an amp sim, this is your bread and butter right here. Up next, we got the Archetype Rabia Masad. I don't really use this one too much, but it is incredibly inspiring. I'll put it in B for the synthesizer and the arpeggiator, excuse me. Again, kind of similar to anything I've said in this tier list. If it's got something unique, I will respect it and, feel more inspired with it and, want to use it more. I'm not really necessarily a big fan of like the high gain tones. Again, similar to like the Petrucci, it's a little gained out and a little squishy to me, but it has an insane library of presets and different tones, from like single coil strats to nu metal to an arpeggiator to leads to cleans to acoustic stuff and anything in between, right? So it's got you covered no matter what your genre is. So for that, I will put it in B tier. Archetype Gojira, let's put it up where it belongs, in S tier. I believe this one has gone up over the years for me. And the reason being is because this is my live guitar tone when I play with Elijah. We use the Archetype Gojira on the Quad Cortex. We started doing that since September of this year, I believe. And yeah, it's my live tone. I hear it in my ears and in front of house every single night. And I'll hear it again in 12 days down in Nashville, my next show, my next festival show. Hearing the Gojira, for example, on the Vegas Strip last week was super sick, dude. I use it all the time. I use it every single night. It sounds amazing. And because it has Neural DSP Quad Cortex compatibility, I'm a fan of that. And in my opinion, that deserves to go up in the tier list. So I'm incredibly biased because I use a Quad Cortex. Like, if amp sims were made for Axe Effects and I used an Axe Effects, I would certainly favor them versus ones that don't. You know what I'm saying? Like, it's obviously incredibly biased, but I have to just not shy away from my biases and just like admit it. So the fact that the Gojira sounds amazing, it's great for rhythm tones and high gain tones, and I use it live every single night. It's got a great transpose knob. It's amazing. So S tier for me. The Clairvoyant from Modern Metal Songwriter, I'll put it in B tier. Very solid. Great amp sim. Similar to all the B tiers with the exception of the Rabia. Just kind of middle of the road. It does everything great. The whole marketing behind this amp sim, and it's a great thing, is you don't have to focus on the tones and the tone shaping and the tone dialing. Just pick something and it's mix ready. This is more focused on songwriting and for the songwriter, not necessarily for the mix engineer or the guitar player who wants to tweak a whole bunch of tones. Like, if you just want something sick, turn it on your track and it'll be good to go. Soldano SLO 100. I don't really use it, man, but it's awesome, but it's just, I'll put it in C tier. It's great. The Soldano SLO 100 is one of the best high gain tones of all time, but I don't know, something about this amp sim kind of gets lost for me. I'm not exactly sure why. I maybe used it once or twice after the trial run and stuff like that. I don't know, it fell by the wayside. The Soldano amp sim was never really one of my go-to amp sounds. I've always liked the obvious, like the EVH stuff, like the Stealth and the EL34, and then, dual rectifier, stuff like that. But the Soldano sound, just never really did it for me, even though I love for Unlawful Carnal Knowledge. It's just, I don't know, just kind of just gets washed in the mix for me personally. Will Putney STL Tonality, an old amp sim, almost 6 years old now. Can you believe that, guys? Can you believe I'm still doing this after all this time? And can you believe that so much time has passed? I'm gonna put it in A tier. It's literally just designed for high gain tones. And there's one tone, one preset that I'll never forget. Watch me get the number wrong. But if my memory serves correctly, it's called Evergreen and it's number 16. With the diesel amp sim, it just sounds so ridiculous. It sounds like a roll of thunder. And it's not even necessarily like the most usable tone, but that tone alone was so inspiring, and I used it all throughout the later 2010s and early 2020s. It's kind of one of those paving the way and kind of was really pushing the amp sim game. I remember when this came out, everybody was super stoked in like May of 2019. And that was a great year for me in this channel, one of my better years. So has a little bit of sentimental value to me when that came out. So anyway, yeah, A tier, great for high gain tones. I love it, man. Amped Roops from ML Sound Lab, the signature amp sim from Mr. Ryan Bruce. I will put it in B tier. I don't necessarily remember where I put it in years past, but for right now, here at the end of 2024, almost 2025, I'll put it in B tier. Similar to all the B tier ones, it's just run of the mill. It's great. One feature that's awesome is it is free if you just want the EL34 amp sim, the one that's on the graphic right there. That's completely free. So for that, that's, you know, going to put it up higher compared to all the other ones. But it also has like a Friedman, a dual rectifier, and one more. I can't remember what it is, but I remember it has 4 amp sims. I haven't necessarily used it in quite some time. I used to use it quite heavily, like around the time when we were all in lockdown. Yeah, great little amp sim. I dig it. Let's speed this up. Archetype Pliny. I'm going to put it in A tier. One of the pioneers as well. I remember when this one came out, this was after the whole NTS buzz and the nameless buzz, and it was like March or April of 2019, and this was like the first one that was like a suite for me, and it wasn't just like a one stock sound like the nameless is. And it has great rhythm tones, great lead tones, and great clean tones and crunch and everything like that. This seems like the infancy of like what the Petrucci came. It was just, you know, the Petrucci came out 3-4 years later, whenever it was. But it was just like, again, one of the pioneers for real DSP. Let's go with the Mixed Wave Spirit Box Mike Stringer Amp Sim S tier. I wrote a lot of Subtle Comeback, my second album, with this amp sim. I even got some presets on there, so if you buy the amp sim, my name is in the preset window, which is a huge honor. I love Mike. Mike and I have actually become legitimate friends, and I actually got to go see Spirit Box on their secret album release show about 2 weeks ago. And then we went to Guitar Center, me and Mike, and looked at like $20,000 Les Pauls and stuff. So that was fun, man. So, you know, I'm obviously biased with all that, but this amp sim, in my opinion, if I was to create an amp sim, a boy can dream, it would be literally something very similar to this. I love the washed out ambient preset. I love the high gain stuff. I love my own personal preset that I made called Angry. Obviously, I love it. I made it. I'm biased, but I've had a lot of people reach out to me and tell me how much they enjoyed that one as well. So, yeah, one of my favorites, if not top 2, top 3 favorite amp sims of all time. Love the Mixed Wave Mike Stringer. Neural DSP Omega Ampworks Granifier. B tier. It only does one thing, in my opinion, just like high gain, but what it does is amazing. It's also really cool that it has a Mick Thompson and a V-Man preset as well. And really, that's like one of the only times Slipknot has ever done anything digital for purchase. I think that's really cool, and having a Mick Thompson preset especially is amazing, because Mike, his guitar tech, owns and works in and with Omega and Slipknot, so it makes sense. So that preset alone is worth the entire price of the amp sim, in my opinion. So, but apart from that, it is rather limiting, but it does high gain tones really, really well. Tonality Lassie Lammert. It's great and it sounds awesome. It's got the driftwood and stuff, and it's really cool, but I'm just going to put it in C tier. Kind of gets lost with all the other ones. To the best of my knowledge, I don't know if it does anything different than any other amp sim out there, other than the driftwood, the Purple Nightmare, which is a selling feature, but is not that exciting for me personally. Kind of forgot about this one. Don't even really remember when it came out, maybe early 2021, something like that. It's solid, but it's just not necessarily anything that sticks out to me personally. Man, we're going to end on a high note here. Let's go with the Auto Audio 1111 S tier. Does one thing great, but that one thing it does is absolutely amazing. You guys have heard me gush over this amp sim for years now. It's a little outdated. It needs a tuner. God, I can't believe it doesn't have a tuner. It needs a transpose knob. It needs effects. It needs a lot of work. But thank God that the one sound that it does make is amazing. And this, I've never really f***ed with it other than just turning it on, and that's it. Like the stock out of the box sound, that's all I've ever really used with this. And I've written a lot of tunes with this. A lot of Subtle Comeback was demoed and recorded with the 1111. Very inspiring. It's really like my 2023 was really heavily influenced by the 1111. So yeah, a lot of Subtle Comeback was written and recorded with that amp sim. Here we go. Let's go with the JST Toneforge Mr. Mansour. I'm going to put it in D tier. Yeah, just not really my favorite, man. Never really enjoyed it. Was always bummed by it. Feels kind of flat and stale, and I think it was a huge step down from like the Menace or something like that. Now, this amp sim is almost 7 years old now. It's over 6 years old. So it doesn't really matter. I mean, time has evolved and amp sims have moved on. But yeah, one of my most disappointed pieces of gear of all time was this amp sim. Fortin Nameless X S tier. This is now announced to where you can use it on the Quad Cortex. This amp sim was used, I think, exclusively on my new album that is called Human Taste Bad, which will be out January 10th, 2025. If you guys want to go check that out, it's awesome, man. I'm super proud of it. 3rd solo album ever. Really, really stoked on it. Yeah, every single rhythm guitar tone, to the best of my knowledge, was using the Fortin Nameless suite. Whether it's drop F baritones on my signature guitar, my drop A sharp on my Stratocaster, my Floyd Rose Strat, or like drop C sharp stuff with my Les Paul or my Dean or something like that. Nameless suite covered it all. So yeah, man, Humans Taste Bad. It's heavily using the Nameless. We got 2 STL Tones amp sims at the end here. West Borland STL Tonality. Haven't done a video on it, but it's pretty sick, and it's got West Borland's name on it. I'll put it in A tier. The high gain tones aren't necessarily my favorite, and a smidge disappointing, but I think that was just me expecting like a ripper of a modern metal amp sim. It's a little bass heavy and a little woofy and full sounding, but the ambience and the clean tones and all the obscurity and all the unique effects you can get with this amp sim and the West Borland kind of flavor in your original music if you're a creator, that's amazing, dude. So I promise I'll get a video out for it. Take my word for it. I love it. It's unique. It brings something to the table, especially from STL Tones, and they hadn't done a tonality amp sim in quite some time. The fact that they did this one and the fact that it hit and it is different and unique and worth something, it belongs in A tier. And let's end the video on a high note. STL Tonality Andy James. One of my favorite amp sims of all time, S tier. I think it's just one of the most cleanest, most pristine, CPU friendly amp sims of all time. All it does is clean, lead, and rhythm. That's it. It doesn't do anything else. It's not very flashy and it's not very advanced. It's kind of old and outdated. But I would say right now, the Mixwave Mike Stringer, the Fortin Nameless X, and this one, the STL Tonality Andy James, they're like my top 3 favorite amp sims of all time. And 80% of all the music I've written and recorded was using all 3 of these amp sims. And yeah, the Tonality Andy James for years, dude, we're talking like 4 or 5 years, was like the only amp sim I used when I wanted to practice or when I would teach or when I would demo something. It's all I use, man. It never crashes. It sounds great every single time, no matter the tuning or the guitar. I love it so much. So everybody, that's my tier list for 2024 with amp sims. What do you guys think of my thoughts and opinions? Leave your thoughts and opinions down below. I'd love to hear from you guys. With that being said, thank you so much for watching. Hope you guys enjoyed this video. Some good, lighthearted, wholesome fun. That's what I'm trying to say there. So anyway, everybody, be sure to like, subscribe,